Hey, welcome to the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute with your host, the Alchemist of Indiana's Black Forest, Alan Bishop. Hey, this channel is all about home distilling and legal distilling. If you've got questions, reach out to us in the comments below, social media, or via bishopshomegrown@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out thealchemistcabinet.com.
Hey, what's up, guys? Alan Bishop, the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute here again. You'll have to ignore my voice. The garden is kicking ass. Unfortunately, it's also kicking my ass. And I've been picking a lot of green beans, and green beans have always kind of messed up my sinuses and all that sort of stuff. So I sound a little froggy today, I'm not gonna lie, but got to do videos anyways. So I got a few questions here, thought I'd get into them. And as always, if you have questions, reach out to me at bishopshomegrown@gmail.com, YouTube comments below, and or any of my social media. Make sure you check out the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute Sacred and Profane podcast on Spotify. I think there's 5 or 6 episodes up now. I'm about to put up 2 more. For some reason, Spotify will only let me put up 2 episodes at a time. Otherwise, I would have done the bulk dump that we talked about in some previous videos. There's some really cool stuff on there I think you guys will really enjoy. There's a chipmunk on my porch getting ready to get into my sunflowers. See him over there? Look at him. He's gonna get in that bag of sunflowers. He does this all the time. This is like an all-day, everyday thing. Oh, there he goes. He's gonna fill up his cheeks with sunflowers, and he's gonna go hide in his burrow over there by the railroad tracks, the old railroad tracks. Anyways, also don't forget to pick up your copies of the One Piece at a Time Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 and Volume 2 books. They are available at thealchemistcabinet.com in the warehouse section. And I think there's a lot of stuff that you guys will enjoy in those books. I am working on part 3 right now. Part 1 sort of semi-autobiographical, and then has some process stuff in there from my early years. And then part 2 is a lot of recipes, including botanical bills for absinthe and pastis and orange juice-based brandies and cinnamon eau de vie and all kinds of weird stuff. Part 3 will have a lot of that stuff, plus a lot of methodology, plus a lot of spirituality. I'm looking forward to getting into that. Probably start really working on that in earnest this fall. Focus a lot on agave in there, maybe a lot on apple brandy, and see if we can't come up with something really cool for you guys that continues to expand our base of knowledge in that book series. So anyways, questions today. So from Jamie Goins, thanks for sharing your knowledge. In a past video, you were discussing esterification while running plates in full reflux for a while, after the heads of course. My question is, what are your thoughts on heating your boiler to 150 to 160 degrees, insulating it well, letting it set overnight to affect the esters? Would several hours of this heat produce more esterification or off flavors? That's actually a really good question. I'm not entirely sure the answer of it. My instinct says that while it's going to produce esterification, there's only a certain amount of esterification you can get, regardless of time spent under heat, right? Longer amounts of time under heat aren't necessarily going to do anything except possibly cause bacteria to grow. Is my guess, as far as like setting overnight. Now, a couple hours in the still is one thing, but overnight, building up bacteria is another thing. Man, there's flies everywhere, I apologize. If you want more esterification, what I would probably look at instead is like Fisher's esterification process, or even some of the ideas of muck or dunder pits with rum. This was actually done with bourbon and rye whiskey way back when in the early 1800s. What we think of now as sour mashing, where you're either adding spent mash back into your next cook or something of that nature in order to rectify heat, drop your pH, etc., is not exactly how it was being done in the early 1800s. In the early 1800s, what was being done was they were pulling their mash or their wash, their spent mash or wash out of the still, and setting it aside in vats in order to allow lactic bacteria or various other bacteria to build up over time. Before they actually put that back into the next fermentation process, much more similar to what you would see with Caribbean style rums and things of that nature in particular. So if you want a lot more esterification, that's stuff you can play with. Of course, in rum production in certain countries, they will also potentially add lime and or specific acids in order to get other or deeper esterification and get funkiness. And also they switch out what they may or may not put in their retort system or their thumps to create esterification as well. So there's a very deep rabbit hole to go down there if you need more esterification. But I'd say for the most part with whiskey or brandy or anything of that nature, what we talked about on the channel before with heating up and doing full reflux for a good amount of time, that's going to give you what you want more than likely. So if you want something funkier than that, prepare to put it in a barrel, because it's probably going to need to go into a barrel. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some white rums out there, white heavy rums out there, and if that's your thing, go for it. I can't, a lot of those I can't drink, but that's just me, and I don't know even if I could palate them, if I'd want to drink much of them, because I don't want to feel like death the next morning. So I sound like death right now. Again, I apologize. But anyways, that was a great question, though, regardless. But definitely research muck pits and dunder pits, and also using acids to esterify. Boston Apothecary website has got a great, huge, long source of resources and information, antique resources and information specifically related to rum, but that could be applied to whiskeys as well out there. And I highly encourage you to go check out that website, bostonapothecary.com. So another question, I don't remember who this came from. I can't, oh, here it is. It's actually on here, Stephen Butler. So I think this was actually left in the feed of the channel on one of the videos. So what all are you tracking and taking notes of when you're going through the fermentation process, all the way to distillation and aging if it's an aged spirit? Also, any advice on working on spirits in a certain order based off of a pot still, like start with X and then move to Y? Thanks again for all you do. These are fantastic questions. So I tend to try to keep track of, obviously, temperatures, whatever process I'm using, whether it's step mash, or if I'm doing sugar shine, or if I'm doing a traditional bourbon style cook, going to 190 and then dropping. I keep track of the temperatures, where if I'm adding exogenous enzymes, where I added those at, how long I held. I keep track of the pH, I keep track of the specific gravity. You know, if it's a fermentation that doesn't look like it's going great, a lot of times I'll check the specific gravity day 2 or day 3 just to see where it's at, although luckily that does not happen very often, especially in my commercial environment that I'm in. Everything there is pretty consistent, and honestly, short of equipment failure one time because the chiller went down, we have never lost a fermentation due to negligence of the fermentation at Spirits of French Lick. When it comes to actually distilling, on the stripping still, every 30 minutes I'm checking the proof and the temperature, just make sure my condenser's not getting too hot, see how much yield roughly I'm going to get off of it. I do all my beer math as well, so I'll figure out, specific gravity and then finished gravity, and figure out how much alcohol percentage that is based on the formulas that we laid out in the Alchemist Cabinet Volume 1 philosophy. A lot of times, every time I distill, I'm writing down temperature, barometric pressure outside, and moon phase. I like to keep track of that because eventually I'm going to graph it out, because people think I'm full of shit, but moon phases do affect pot still distillation pretty substantially. When I am doing the doubling run, if it's something that's interesting and something that's new to me in particular, a lot of times I like to, my dog's trying to get in the house, I like to make tasting notes as I go, right? And this is really fun for something like absinthe, where it pie pieces out, depending on the proof. As you distill, you taste different flavors from those different botanicals. A lot of times I'll make notes, I'll do the time, whatever my heat rate is, if I'm at 35% or 45%, whatever I'm at, and then I'll do, the temperature and the proof, and then next to that I might write a note about what I'm tasting. I apologize for the hand in the camera, but the flies are freaking everywhere. Everything is just interfering with this video today. So when it comes to aging, I don't write a lot of notes unless I'm doing tasting notes specifically for a product that we're releasing, and I'm the one that writes up all those tasting notes that you see in the marketing and all that stuff. Do not leave that to the marketing team. I do not leave it to anybody else. And none of the other people there are trained distillers. They're not trained blenders. They don't know what they're looking for. It's not a knock to them, not trying to hurt their feelings. That's just the way that it is. Sometimes I will make notes, like if I find a very special barrel that's got some unique flavor profiles to it, I'll put a number 4 on it, which means it's a potential single barrel, and then I'll write just a couple, handful of notes on the barrel itself in permanent marker, what I'm tasting in it, or what we might be able to potentially finish it in or finish it with. So that's something to consider as well. Also, any advice on working on spirits in a certain order based off of pot still, like start with X and then move to Y? So for me, if you're starting off as a home distiller, I would always start off with a sugar shine. I mean, that's just what it is. It's easy, it's simple. Uncle Jesse's Simple Sour Mash, 1 pound of grain per gallon, 1 pound of sugar per gallon. As long as you have clean fermentation space and good yeast strain, there's very little that could go wrong with that, and it's a great way to learn to make your cuts. The cuts will not be the same when you go to something else, but I think that's a great starting point. From there, you could either go to all grain whiskey or you could go over to all fruit brandy. Bearing in mind that your cuts on either of those are entirely different than the Sugar Shine, and they're also going to be entirely different from one another. Brandy is an entirely different beast completely from mostly every other spirit out there as far as the way that you're going to make your cuts. After that, I'd probably look into rum. You know, you've already done the Sugar Shine, you've done all grain, you've done all fruit. Now let's look at a rum. Take that sugar to the next level. Figure out what you can do with that. And rum is a very deep rabbit hole. Depending on what culture it comes from, what geographic location. Is it an agricole? Are you doing a cachaça? Are you doing stuff from sugarcane, processed sugar, etc.? Right? That's all. You know, I'll even include things like sorghum and things like maple syrup in there. They fall in that same category. Your sugars, your honeys, right? That's the another whole other level of learning there. Then after that, I would step up and start learning how to make higher proof alcohols for bases, for things like absinthe, gin, and aquavit. You know, going up to 170 proof as we talked about on the channel for your base alcohol. And after that, then start playing with your gins. And then you work your way backwards. Start with high proof ethanols, do your gins and your absinthes, etc. at 170 proof. Then work your way down to, okay, let's do a stripping run of whatever we really like to do, followed by a doubling run where we're actually adding the botanicals into the distillation. And then work your way even further backwards into the more historic stuff like the Groots and the stone beers that you can distill, where you're actually, you know, using hot rocks to boil worts and throwing your different botanicals into your fermentation and playing around with wild yeast and playing around with Kveik yeast and that sort of stuff. Walk before you run, and then run like a motherfucker when you run. But figure out what you like to do, what you're passionate about, and what you're good at. And probably you'll find as a distiller, at least I have, there are certain things that you're better at because you're more passionate about them. It's not that you can't learn them. It's just that you're more passionate about the things that you are really good at than the other things. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I hope that answers your question. And thanks for sending it in. As always, send me your questions, guys. Can't keep the channel going without them. I love y'all. Have a great one. Hopefully, I think I got one more video here to do today. Hopefully by the time I do more videos, this fucking death sound will be gone.